so I shouldn't stay in that area?
Yeah, I was usually, I would just keep it up. Just keep it up here. Really, I get the feedback when I'm just out here. Here's a little hot. So if you're up here, let's go.
No, I can roam around, right?
I think so, yeah.
But just don't be there.
Just don't be back here.
Okay.
You'll hear it.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the startup at the Armory. Welcome to our Economic Outlook Forum for 2021. I'd like to recognize Delegate Pam Queen, if she's in the audience, as well as Steve Lafferty. Also, Baltimore County Chamber for live streaming at your breakfast, as well as to our web audience out there. And now, I would like to welcome to the podium Towson University's 14th president. She has been with us since 2016. Dr. Kim Schatzel came in a storm in January and is leaving her mark here in Towson University as well as Towson proper. So to the stage I welcome my boss, Dr. Kim Schatzel.
Thank you, Daraius. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody in here. I always start out, how many of you have been in this building before? Raise your hands. Isn't it amazing? It's absolutely amazing. We are just so thrilled. See if I can move this a little. We are just so thrilled to be here. We had an event last night here. We're using it tremendously in terms of our engagement with the community itself. And this houses the startup, and that is our business accelerator as well as our business engagement center. It's really part of the strategy that we have as a university. I always say that universities don't have big front doors. You kind of don't know where to go to be able to knock to find where the resources are, students, faculty, and staff. So to be able to have this space where business, and whether it be new venture entrepreneurs, whether it be corporate leaders, whether it be government or elected officials, if they're looking to connect with Towson, find students for internships, find students for job opportunities, be able to collaborate with our faculty and staff on research, this is the place you can come. You can come and we'll be able to help you make those connections because we want to be easy to do business with and wanted to be able to create the center to be able to do that. And also the accelerator, as I mentioned, was to be able to nurture entrepreneurs in terms of being able to develop their business concepts and grow their business. So we're just thrilled to be able to do that. And it connects the community, not just Towson, but greater Baltimore, to 22,000 students and over 4,000 faculty and staff. So we're just thrilled to be in this space and to be able to continue our role as an anchor institution. Innovation is going to happen here. Innovation is happening here as well as entrepreneurship. So I can't think of a better place for Daraius to be talking about economic outlook for our state and for our region. I also want to tell you about the fact that we recently launched the Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute. And that was created to be able to deal with the challenges of leadership development in our region and our state. It's an outward-facing institute to be able to provide businesses, nonprofits, government sectors with the ability to connect on programs for their leadership development of their personnel. And let me talk about why I think the timing for this couldn't be any better. Every single business person I talk to, every single nonprofit I talk to, every single government agency I talk to is talking about the tumultuous state of the labor markets. That there's the resignation era that's coming and people are moving around and changing jobs and looking for better jobs. So we had a leadership deficit before the pandemic, and this tumult in the labor markets is only exacerbating this leadership deficit. And if you have it in your organization and you don't pay attention to the leaders that are in it, that you don't invest in them, guess what's going to happen? That's right. They're going to look to go someplace else for an organization that's going to invest in them. And that's what the Grasmick Institute offers. So if any of you are interested in learning more about that, I know that Patrick and Daraius can be able to support the connections there. It's just a terrific time for us to be able to offer such an impactful program when the needs of leadership development and organizations in the area are just really calling for it. So we're excited about it. I know that you've seen some of the work that we're doing on York Road. We opened up our new science complex. We have a big hole in the campus right now, which is the College of Health Professions. For those of you that don't know, we are the leading provider of healthcare professionals to the state of Maryland. So those two buildings and the support that we got from the governor and the legislature was critically important for us to continue our mission, and we're dedicated to be able to do that. So I just want to provide my welcome to everybody this morning. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the updates that we have, and again, it's a great time to be a Tiger, and thank you all so much for being here.
Well, good morning. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the team that has put this together. So I'd like to thank Sharon Grove, David Brazenton, and Cassidy Cregan, and the rest of the outreach and partnership team that has made this day possible in terms of the infrastructure. I'd also like to thank my team at RESI, Ellen Bast, Jacob Lay, Ali Gruber, and Nada Shokri. Without them, this would be a very short presentation, lacking both substance and style. And finally, I'd like to thank my boss, the President Schatzel, as well as the rest of my peers in the university. Without them, we would not be where we are today. So without further ado, I'd like to talk about the presentation. So this year's theme is Jumanji. So I was told I can't step back there. Now I know, now they're not for real. Yes, so there are surprises like that feedback around each corner, each roll of the dice, and so we want to kind of, talk about the economy. 2021 is almost over. 2022 is around the corner. 2030 horizon. I say this basically as there are some significant challenges facing the economy, both in the near term as well as the short term. Not in any particular order, but it was raised with President Schatzel, labor issues. We've got the Great Resignation, supply chain issues, COVID is still haunting us, political issues, commodity price issues, geopolitical issues, climate change. Any one of these would be challenging by themselves, but all seven present an extraordinary challenge to the economy. So, labor issues, we already had heard this. This was already a challenge pre-COVID. And we saw that many firms saw shortages in transportation, manufacturing, healthcare. In Maryland, of the 115,000 job openings, 55,000 were in healthcare and IT services. Pre-pandemic, it was difficult to get hold of any of those two occupations, and now the pandemic has only exacerbated, plus added on top of that, shortages of teachers, shortages of childcare workers. Some have blamed sort of the enhanced federal unemployment benefits as keeping many people out of the workforce. The data is not supportive of this. The data is not supportive of this, and it might be a contributing factor, but there are other things going on. According to the Fed, 1.5 million more individuals retired than were on track to pre-COVID. 1.5 million people have left the labor market for good, and as a result, basically, the labor market is down that much. Childcare. As I mentioned before, there's a shortage of childcare workers. Well, that translates into a shortage of childcare available spaces, which basically means that individuals can't find a spot for their kid, which basically means that in some cases, many women are kept out of the labor force due to it. Demographics are not on our side. We are getting older, we are producing fewer babies. As a result, basically, our labor force is not growing as fast. Immigration might be a cure, but right now our system is not working well to support immigration for individuals in some markets. For example, I will say they are currently now processing green card applications for adult children who are single, coming from India. They applied in 2005. So now remember, in order for them to continue on, they have to remain single, because as soon as they become married, they go back to the bottom of the pile, or to a new line. So, we have a system, an immigration system, that isn't working well, that is going to prove to be an obstacle to help us kind of move forward. One of the other things is labor force participation rate is down. So all these things have sort of driven the labor force participation rate. It's down about 2 percentage points, a significant amount. At the onset of COVID, we saw that number of workers in hospitality and accommodations and food services were laid off immediately. Boom. Now restaurants, hotels, and event venues are finding it difficult to hire those workers back. For those 18 months, many of those workers found new skills, new opportunities, There are obviously some better opportunities perhaps working for Amazon, some better opportunities working for Target, and we're seeing that even in childcare. In some cases, childcare workers can earn more working at Target, Walmart, Costco than they can doing in their chosen profession. So that's sort of a bit of a tragedy going on. So to link to this also, as driving it, is the underlying supply chain issues. And underlying that are labor shortages, both here as well as worldwide. And again, for example, the cost of shipping now has increased from $5,000 per container to over $30,000 due to labor shortages or COVID issues. There are shortages of key components. We're not talking basically mass components being dropped. We're talking maybe a certain gear that is steel, that is hardened steel, that is needed for a certain piece of manufacturing equipment. Well, the company that makes that hardened gear is shut down because of COVID, which basically means now that the company that needs that gear to produce that piece of equipment for the next manufacturer can't get it. And until that is resolved, that's going to result in basically those goods not to be made. So we're talking even things from chips. We oftentimes about the chip shortages, and that's fine. That's about a 3 to 5 year investment needed to be made, but also even specialized plastics that go into dashboards. That's also being in short supply. So other factors that we've also seen, so because of COVID, we saw a shutdown in airline flights. Well, oftentimes those airlines took freight as part of their passenger manifest. That stopped. So all of a sudden, that method to kind of get those airplanes full of cargo is no longer there. COVID is a common thread, and even though we have a vaccine, we're not quite out of the woods yet. So worldwide, we're still in single digits in some countries. Other countries are a bit higher, but the vaccine has become a politicized issue. Vaccine mandates, mask mandates, are fought. COVID will be with us for the foreseeable future. So we need to sort of balance that out. Now, aside from masks and vaccines becoming a hot button issue for political, normal items such as sort of voting about budgets, voting about debt ceilings, voting about continuing resolutions have become divisive. We've seen the Democrats have not been able to pass the infrastructure bill, and every week we hear that this is going to be the week they vote on it. The debt ceiling is looming. In early December, we'll see a resolution on that. The 2022 elections are just around the corner. And then throwing into that, we've had commodity price increases. We've seen basically oil go up significantly. The cost of gas pump has gone up. We've seen car prices go up, both used and new. Home, lumber, and other goods have kind of gone up. In many cases, we've all seen those price hikes back to up. Now, just this morning or last night, it was announced the Fed is dialing back its bond purchases. That's expected sort of, kind of impact long-term interest rates. So your new mortgages will tend to be a bit higher. And then looming over sort of all this are the geopolitical. OPEC, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, our commitment to greenhouse gases. Climate change is a considerable factor in the economy. As we go forward, how do we harden ourselves? Do we see it as an opportunity? The U.S. economy and Maryland are facing challenges. And I will walk through this presentation, which is made up of 8 kind of sections, and we'll begin. So we yearn to see these numbers boom, but lately they only bring gloom. So GDP rose at one of its smallest levels in recent memory. Now, I was actually surprised between the Delta variant, supply chain issues, labor shortages, and rising prices. I was surprised that even GDP grew at all. Here we see consumption is stagnated. So, nothing to buy. Even though we're a nation of see it, want it, buy it, we aren't seeing it on the shelf, so we can't want it, and therefore we can't buy it. So we're seeing a lot of that kind of going on in the economy. The good news is investment, sort of the lone bright spot, sort of companies are trying to replenish their inventories, perhaps invest for the future in terms of what they're going on, but still, consumption is 70% of our economy. Investment is just under 10% of the economic activity. Government spending, hasn't really changed. We've not seen, outside of the earliest stimuluses, we're not seeing any much big changes in government spending. Now, we want to import goods, so imports grew, exports shrunk in the third quarter. So we're definitely importing more, and we're exporting less than we have in the past. Now, the good news is Maryland, most recent data for Maryland is quarter one, quarter two of 2021, both experienced a significant growth above 6%. So that's good for Maryland. We definitely did grow, and that certainly is good for us. We're not very happy. We're not as sad. So this is the Consumer Sentiment Index based out of 100, 100 being sort of happy. You can sort of see there are 2 points here, November 2008, the last election, also the onset of the last recession. We're about 55.3, so really unhappy. And then most recent data, October 2021 at 71.7. But you can see that basically since 2020, we've been really kind of, well below around the 70-point mark. Low point recently was 70.3 in August. So generally speaking, we're not very happy with what's going on. Shelves devoid of merchandise. What still remains is overpriced. We go to stores now. We see a lot of sort of empty shelves. I mean, we look at them and go, "There's something's missing. Something that doesn't quite feel as good," or we're looking for certain goods and they're not quite there. One of the things we've seen this is inventory of cars. There are 7.7 million fewer cars being produced worldwide, out of probably about 25 million. That represents 3% of global output. In Japan, exports fell by 46% because of basically they couldn't produce enough cars. Now, I will say, if you're looking for a fully loaded pickup truck with all the bells and whistles, you will have no problem finding it. But if you're looking for a bare bones pickup truck or a bare bones compact car, you won't find it, unless it's something that's sort of laying in inventory somewhere hidden. Generally speaking, the car companies are using the chips, whatever chips they have, for their high margin cars. In fact, Toyota reported record profits just recently, or actually this morning, I just saw on the news. So generally speaking, car prices have gone up. Used car prices, which tended to be sort of a place where people could buy, a car in that affordable range, kind of upgrade, rather than getting a basic new car, they could get a really good used car. That's now unobtainable. So in many cases, people are finding they can go on there, they can trade their car in for at or more than they bought it for originally. So it's entirely crazy. Now the bad news is you can certainly trade your car in, but you'll either have to buy a more expensive car or you won't be able to buy a car at all. And I would say that smaller inventory issues extend across all of retail. So this is a ratio, as I said, the prior slide, also the ratio of inventory to sales, and you can sort of see here, even in the across all retail, you're seeing that number was about 1.5, 1.45. It rose briefly, but now it's almost at 1.20. So even retailers are finding that basically they're not able to keep goods on shelves, and again, they're not able to they're not able to stock the shelves fully. The concern obviously now is the upcoming holiday season, right? So everyone's excited about Christmas, the new toy, which we don't know what's going on. But the other issue is, will it get here for this Christmas, or will it get here for spring, for Easter? We don't know. The challenge is shipping costs. So right, as I mentioned before, it went from $5,000 to about $30,000. Now you could probably get it for half that if indeed you're willing to basically sort of, piggyback on someone else's shipping. So oftentimes containers might be not as full, you can go into that one, but you're not really sure when that container will come. The other thing too is you're not really sure is basically how long it will take for them to empty that container. Because as I mentioned before, we've got shortages in all the industries, transportation especially. So it's one thing for the stuff to be put on the container in China, shipped over, and we're seeing basically off the port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, the wait times are increasing from just under 10 days now to over 10 days for the ship to be unloaded. But once it gets unloaded, it still has to get to its destination. And that's difficult basically if you have a shortage of truck drivers going forward. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge, and that holds true for most things here. So as I said, the pandemic is causing disruptions in all points of the supply chain. As I said, in some countries, we're seeing very low rates of vaccination. We're seeing COVID outbreaks, which are resulting in basically those companies having to shut down, which basically means that basically we can't get those particular pieces of goods that we need for that one little gear for our machine that we need to produce to send on to our next client. We can't get that. Raw material production has gone down. Shipping, factory production, retail shortages, even computer chips, pulp for paper and cardboard. It's very difficult. So this is an ongoing challenge that we face. Like a balloon, but not as fun. What once bought two, now it just buys one. So inflation has really been kind of hitting up the market here in the economy. You can sort of see gas prices, I mentioned before, have gone up tremendously. Instead of costing $50 to fill up your tank, it now costs you $75. Significant cost for many people. The other thing too is that we saw that because of the months between March through probably June of 21, we saw basically a lot of people weren't commuting as much. So basically they weren't filling their tanks up. So some of this price increase is due to the fact that people return to work, but some of it's due to the fact that there are significant supply chain issues about gasoline. For those who own a home, your home values have increased. Now the good news is your home has increased, but then if you decide you want to sell your home, you've got to find the next home, which is then challenging for many people. We've also seen that basically in some areas, as people have decided that they no longer want to commute, they'd rather remote work. So we're seeing places like in Montana explode in property values because basically people figure, it's a good quality of life. I don't mind a bear in my backyard every so often. It's good to keep the rabbits out and all that good stuff. I just make sure I don't let Fido out when the bear's back there. But generally speaking, some people have started to move to places where they want to live and basically remote work into where they are. Consumer prices are up, and now the Fed doesn't call this inflation yet. They're calling it transitory increases in prices, and they keep on pushing that statement back. So it was Chairman Powell is sort of trying to play a bit of some word games here, but at some point, these price increases are going to become sustained, and as a result, it's going to cause basically inflation to be here. So oftentimes we have now two forms of inflation. Yay for us. The last recession we saw shrinkflation. We saw basically that 12-ounce cereal box go down to 10.2. We saw that pint of jam go down to 12 ounces. That was shrinkflation. Now we're seeing skimp inflation. And skimp inflation is basically services, right? So instead of that pizza taking half an hour, it takes 45 minutes. Instead of your hotel room being cleaned once a day, it's maybe cleaned maybe once every other day, if that. Instead of basically being able to have a nice meal at a restaurant on a Sunday evening, you find that restaurant is closed because they don't have enough wait staff. So that's skimp inflation. So we're seeing that kind of come about as a result of sort of the labor market sort of driving that. Schedules strained, stores in disarray as workers search for better pay. As I mentioned, sort of we saw a huge increase in unemployment in April of 2020. Most recent data, 4.8% unemployment, 8.5% underemployment. Underemployment is basically those individuals who are working part-time but would want to work full-time, as well as those individuals who are marginally attached to the labor force. But generally speaking, this is a broader measure of the people out of work. And basic macro, unemployed individuals are those individuals out of work and actively looking for work. The labor force is defined as those individuals who are employed as well as unemployed. So once you stop looking for work, even if you're out of work, you're not considered to be unemployed. So that means that basically you've decided to stop looking for whatever reason, the Great Resignation. Now, job openings are back yet now exceeding the number of people out of work. So we have about 10 million jobs open, 8 million people unemployed. So about 2 million job gap. And again, we're seeing that mainly in some of the areas like accommodations, food services, and entertainment. Even in Maryland, we still see it in spite of the high unemployment. We're seeing basically more job openings than there are available individuals who are unemployed. Now remember, unemployed are people who are actively looking for work. So just because that person is playing Xbox, in the basement, they're not looking for work. They're playing Xbox. They're not considered to be unemployed by the federal government. Now, people are quitting their jobs at record rates. So we're seeing this number go north nationally about 3%. So typically speaking, it's about just around 2.2%. We saw it hit about 2.9% August, most recent data. Even here in Maryland, we're seeing this number trend up as people decide to quit their jobs without even having another job in their back pocket. So oftentimes people are just leaving, they're deciding they no longer, some people have decided, after 18 months of being in the house, they really enjoy that work-life balance. And so when the mandate came back to come back into work, they decided, you know what? I don't want that 45-minute commute anymore. I don't want to pay for parking. And quite frankly, I really don't like my office mates. They all suck. So they decided that, you know what, I'll just quit my job and maybe do gig work. So DoorDash and other things are available. Or if they have certain skills. So there are certain jobs, there are occupations such as IT, accounting, that can be done remotely. Effectively. Project management can be done remotely very effectively. So many of those individuals are looking for those types of jobs that go forward. In fact, now we're seeing more and more applicants ask, is this remote? Are there teleworking options for this particular position? So that's going to be a continuing trend that we expect to see going forward. Even though we've seen wages have been declining relative to inflation, and culminating in sort of the labor force participation rate. It's gone down. It's down about 2 percentage points. So about 64%, 65% nationally. It's dropped significantly, and it's not recovered. You can sort of see that big dip around March of 2020, and then kind of the rise up. It's still not at its previous pre-COVID levels. So individuals are sitting out the recovery. Most times when you see a recovery, people jump back into the labor force. And in fact, one of the perverse things that's happening is the unemployment rate's going down because people aren't looking for work. They're out of the job market. So we're seeing the unemployment rates kind of fall because people decided, well, I'm going to quit my job and not get a new job. And so therefore, I'm out of the labor market. And the labor force participation rate is typically defined as those individuals, as the labor force divided by the population age 16 to 64, and that's going to be, the labor force participation rate. That number won't be ever 100, because generally speaking, there are individuals who are in school, institutions, stay-at-home, spouses. All those things will never get that number up to 100. But generally speaking, pre-pandemic here in Maryland, it was about 68% as the peak. Now it's dropped down to just below 66%. So a significant drop in basically labor force participation rate. So clearly, looking at this, pay, benefits, career, and flexibility are key things as to why individuals are looking for new jobs. It triggers drought, whips up storms as year by year the weather warms. So we've all seen sort of the climate change kind of coming up. What we've also seen now is basically the manifestations of climate change, both nationally as well as here in Maryland. But I think it does represent an opportunity for us. This is an opportunity in terms of new industries. We're seeing basically at trade points some growth in sort of, wind opportunities coming up. We're seeing offshore wind. These are opportunities here for Maryland as well as the nation to sort of to enjoy basically the benefits of basically how do we do climate mitigation. Now, warming weather has led to longer growing seasons. That might sound like a good thing. It might be. It could have a negative effect on the yields of major crops, but it also could limit the types of crops that are grown or encourage invasive species or weed growth, or increase the demand for irrigation in areas where there's not just insufficient. And again, the other thing too is it could disrupt the region's ecosystem, altering the vegetation as well as the animal life going forward. So while it might look like a good thing, there are some negative impacts to it. You know, here in our region, here you can sort of see, we've basically plotted across this graph the daily flooding that's occurred. And you can sort of see, you know, up until about 2009, you know, it was about half dozen times that you saw, you know, Sewell's Point, Virginia, and Annapolis sort of getting flooded. Now, basically, it's almost double digits in many cases in this most recent decade. So we expect that to continue. We saw most recently last week in Annapolis the flooding that took place. And again, a storm surge took place, but also not in Annapolis, but also parts of Baltimore County, as well as Washington, D.C. So it is significant. Wildfires are increasing in the U.S. You know, it's no longer considered to be a fire season, but a fire year. We're seeing tremendous amounts of labor, of man hours used to fight these fires, and a significant economic cost. Half of this cost is driven to California, so it is a significant impact on the economy. Too busy squabbling, making threats to spare a thought for all our debts. The difficulty in passing the infrastructure bill, as well as the soft infrastructure bill, is sort of emblematic of the challenges that are in D.C. with sort of a very polarized government. We have not been able to sort of figure out how to do something that is uniting. So infrastructure. So, you know, whatever you felt about the prior president, infrastructure sort of really crosses all political parties. It's something that we can all kind of get behind and sort of encourage, because like I say, or like many people say, unlike wine, bridges and roads don't get better with time. They actually deteriorate. So we as a nation really need to upgrade our infrastructure. It's just not getting better. Here in Baltimore, in this region, every year I imagine that we're going to hear more about some water line breaks coming the coming winter. We're going to hear more about sewer line disruptions, sinkholes, all the unsexy things that are associated with infrastructure are going to occur going forward. But we sort of really kind of need to get behind that and fix that, because basically it's just not getting better as we go forward. We've seen potential government shutdowns, right? So up until 2012, we really had, you could count on really one hand the number of government shutdowns. Now it's being used more as a political tool to kind of shut us down. The debt ceiling really wasn't an issue until 2012. Then it became sort of the issue to basically bargain with. So again, we're running out. So December 3rd is another risk of a government shutdown. So about a month today, we'll see what happens with the government. Cost, the last government shutdown was about $3 billion in economic activity. And again, we're still in the midst of a COVID recovery. Shutting us down now could actually set us back a little bit further than perhaps we want to be. Now, this has all been in the social media. One thing I found to be quite interesting is that social media has become basically a source of news for many households. So about almost half the households now are using social media as their primary source of news. So the stuff you see on Facebook, as you kind of wind down into Facebook, people are reading that and assuming that's to be the truth, because it's on the internet, so it must be true. It's on the internet. One thing we do, so it's absolutely crazy what's going on in terms of social media, and it's sort of been unregulated, it's sort of been unmanaged. It's been allowed to basically post anything that it wants. So we really need to sort of correct that, because one of the things that's happening is that we're wasting economic resources by sort of stopping events or asking people to do certain things. So the social media is sort of proving to be a less than good idea. 50 experts, each one polled, 50 different futures told. So we've reached now the doom and gloom part of the presentation. That we're going to kind of go over it, looking at the forecast. So one of the key is the vaccination rates. So Maryland, we have been higher rates of vaccinations than the U.S., and getting us back to normal is to sort of kind of get the vaccination rates, closer to 70%. Worldwide, it's still not there. So worldwide, that's going to really impact our ability for the supply chain to be corrected. That's going to be a considerable challenge. And so there are some countries where it's single digits. And again, when there are outbreaks, that does disrupt the production. That's going to be ongoing until basically we can kind of get more COVID relief going forward, not only here in the U.S., but across. As I said, the future of work is going to be a bit transformative. Remote working is probably going to be the key. That's also going to play a special role for commercial buildings. Even events like this, for example, part of this event is live streamed to a digital audience, versus before it used to be packed with people. Now it's basically everyone sort of doing the hybrid approach. That also impacts catering, right? So this event might have had a larger catering order than perhaps in prior years. So that's going to be a consideration. But also the less dense office buildings are and office parks are, that's going to impact some of the businesses that go around support it, right? So before, if you had a deli attached to an office park, before you were making some decent money, but now with the office park maybe half full, you're not making money, you're losing money. So that small business goes out. Now that small business bought food from Cisco. Well, now Cisco sees a decline in its orders. That means that it doesn't have to deliver as much, which basically means that it's going to start cutting back its orders from raw materials. So the fact that we're not as dense as we were in terms of office parks in single locations will have some downstream effects for our economy. Now the good news is we're going to figure this out, because just like this space, we've seen a lot of people come in here, except for today, to do their co-working. They want to work here remotely. It's got good Wi-Fi. It's got good coffee. We have lockers here for people to keep their personal goods if they step out for a moment for lunch. But we're seeing more and more of these suburban sort of co-working spaces kind of arise. So instead of being sort of in a city where, it's like New York City, it's now spread out to the suburbs of New Jersey. So as that kind of goes forward, that might sort of reconfigure sort of how people spend money. Rather than spending money in the central business district, they might spend more money into the suburban communities. It also means that people aren't commuting as much, right? So it's one thing to say, I'm going to go ahead and go to the office. I'm going to take, a 5-minute, a car ride or a 5-minute walk to the train, to an hour train, get on the train and go to the city. Now it's like take basically a 15-minute drive or walk or bike ride to my co-working space and do what I need and not have to worry about it. So I think we're going to see some transformations going forward in our workspace. So let's just sort of our forecast. Now, prior to COVID, with all the things going on in terms of the labor force, we were predicting a bit of a flat, if not sort of declining forecast for workforce, and then for jobs, and then basically COVID hit, and as a result, basically, we saw the jobs decline tremendously, and then basically, the jobs have been slowly kind of coming back. They're still not there, we're still down, but we kind of expect sometime in 2023, from the months of January through December, we expect some recovery. So don't hold me to that time frame of January to December of the time frame. But we expect 2023 to be kind of the point at which we perhaps begin to recover in the economy as sort of the supply chain issues begin to work out, as we begin to see more vaccines come online or become much more widely prevalent, as prices perhaps become no longer transitory rising, but perhaps stop rising in the economy. Our GSP probably won't recover for a little while for the state of Maryland. And again, part of that is we're seeing much more shortages in workforce, which basically means less output. So the fact that there are fewer restaurant sales means that basically there are fewer dollars added to the state's gross state product, fewer hotels being rented, fewer deli sandwiches being ordered, all those things sort of fewer new cars being bought, all that sort of adds up to the point where we expect that the state's GSP to lag behind from where it was before. Construction cranes are in the view, watching Towson grow anew. So I thought I'd end this with a little bit more happy note, be a bit, doom and gloom, but now let's look at a happy note, right? So, every morning on my walk here, I'm in a park in the garage of the library, I see all the construction activity. Since 2016, I've seen basically, the huge swaths, as President Shasta said. We saw the science building come up. We're seeing the big hole in Towson's campus for the health center, the new College of Health coming online. The student union has sort of is in the process of being refurbed. We're seeing this space. I mean, this space is emblematic of what's happening here in Towson. So 5 years ago, this space was a ruin. And I mean a ruin. I mean, basically, it was holes in the ceiling, the floors were buckled, it was bare concrete in the back, there was asbestos. It's gone now, so don't worry about that. You can take a mask, But this transformation of the space sort of emblematic of what's happening here in Towson. It's a good thing. This is something that we should embrace, and it's transformative. I think that I've been at Towson for almost 25 years. And I've seen basically that change that's kind of gone on, and I think we're in a good space as the university becomes much more open to the community. Again, kind of moving it's become part of the Towson. Between 401, we've got 12 floors of space there, which is great for us to be located. It certainly is a great time to be here in Towson. So. $1.7 billion in public and private development is taking place within a quarter mile of our campus, which is great. I like to say we have more investment per square foot in the entire state of Maryland. And, we've actually supported this growth. Again, our purchase of 401, as well as working with Greenberg Gibbons to get this space, up and running. You've got Towson Row coming online. $350 million mixed-use destinations. 2 hotels are being built down the way. It's going to be a great space. Whole Foods is going to be coming online sometime in January. That's going to be a game changer for here in Towson. We've got student housing on York and 101, as well as Altus. So it's great also having the students kind of up here doing their thing. I'm here only Monday through Friday. So what happens on the weekend, I'm not really responsible for, but I think it's great to have the students up here in the heart of Towson buying things. Plus, the other thing too is that we're also putting restaurants that are good for their parents when they come in to visit. So mom and dad don't have to go to the pizza joint. They can take the kid to a nice restaurant rather than sort of the pizza and sort of stepping on the sticky floors with the beer, as we all remember from our days in college. We've put some nice restaurants in the area, which is sort of making it more of and I would like to say this is a university town, which is not in the context of a college town, which is sort of the idea being is that we're here to sort of, embrace all things. So this space here, the Armory, we're going to be launching companies. We've got 13 companies go through our accelerator program, and very successful in terms of raising funds. Soon they'll be launching out into the broader community, hopefully staying here in Towson. Todd here is going to help me find spaces for them to locate them. But the idea being here is that we need to be much more than a Monday through Friday sleepy town. We're going to be here a 24/7 activated town that not only embraces college students, but embraces young entrepreneurs, but also embraces sort of empty nesters as they enjoy sort of life here in Towson with all the vitality, and the fact that you've got a university just down the street with all the cultural activities and the sports activities that go on that will sort of serve as a space for people to kind of gather and enjoy. The Armory, as I mentioned, 21,000 square feet, 6,000 of this is open to the public. So you can come in if you've got a business you want to start, you want to think about, you want to work, please come in. All this stuff is free for use, Monday through Friday, 10 to 7. You can grab Starbucks. You've got a locker here to use to keep your equipment safe. And in this, we're launching companies. We also have our accelerator, as I mentioned. We have Athena Power Link, which is sort of a program to help women entrepreneurs start or continue their business to the next phase. TEDCO is locating up here. Baltimore County has got some offices up here, and even a Starbucks. And I will emphasize, my team put Starbucks with an exclamation point, as in, yay, we've got a Starbucks. So that is that is great for us here in Towson. And then 401 Washington, where I have my offices with my other part of my team. And again, it's 130,000 square feet of office space, and it's wonderful space. It puts us in the heart of downtown. It activates this part of downtown. Before, if you think about it, it's a bit sleepy. I mean, if you think about this building pre-2016, it wasn't very attractive, and nothing much was going on. But in that building is our Office of Technology Services, who are very pleased to be out from the basement in Cook Library and up on the 11th floor. They're able to actually get some vitamin D on a daily basis, as well as strategic partnerships and applied research and university advancement. So, then Circle East up north, again, it's just been a great level of development here in Towson. As even when we go out further, we think about the new apartments by Goucher College, we think about the apartments down York Road, where the old dealerships were. It's growing. So Towson's time has come, and some people thought maybe we'll be the new Bethesda, maybe we were that cool to be the new Bethesda. But generally speaking, having an anchor institution like Towson, having the 4 hospitals here with those healthcare workers in the region, sort of affords that Towson is a wonderful place to both live as well as to work. So before I close up and ask your questions, let me leave you with 5 kind of key takeaways. So while the economy has rebounded after the onset of COVID-19, growth is a bit slowed, and the recovery is becoming a bit more drawn out. So before we were a little bit optimistic, like, yay, we're going to recover, we get the vaccinations. Not so much. Global supply chain disruptions are leading to shortages of both inputs and final goods, affecting prices and contributing to inflation. Economy-wide, this is one of the critical things because this is where workers are quitting or changing their jobs at a high rate, and low-wage jobs remain unfilled as people look for work with better pay and improved working conditions. Political instability in the U.S. threatens both the U.S. and global economies. And finally, the effects of climate change, including coastal flooding, wildfires, and changing the growing season, present long-term threats to the economy. With that bit of doom and gloom at the end, thank you very much, and I will entertain questions. No questions? Yes, Jim.
I've heard claims that part of the supply chain crisis is that in recent years, even before the crisis, the system was working at 100%, and now the crisis is doesn't have any slack to take up the excess. Have you heard that, or can you comment on that in any way?
Yeah, so prior to the pandemic, so the just-in-time inventory approach, excuse me, the question was, prior to the pandemic, the supply chain was operating at 100% efficiency, the idea of the just-in-time inventory. And then the pandemic occurred and it really kind of disrupted it, as many companies did not have any inventory for parts in their bins. And yes, that was sort of a situation where it all had to work like a well-oiled machine to make sure that basically parts got there on time at the right moment. And again, part of it is that ever-driving need to keep costs down. So companies were being driven by I would say their stocks to basically to keep costs as low as possible. Having inventory on hand is a carrying cost, so therefore companies said, look, if I can deliver the inventory just when I need it, I'm good. Now, unfortunately, the pandemic sort of revealed that that didn't work so well, and as a result, we saw the huge disruption. The other challenge is the time lag. So, it takes a while for a ship, I think it's about I forgot the exact number of how long it takes a ship to go from China to the West Coast to deliver its goods. So some companies are thinking, well, maybe I can shorten that by actually building factories here in the U.S. to provide some of those raw materials. But again, those things take time. But to the original question, yes, it was operating at peak efficiency prior to the pandemic, and now basically the pandemic kind of showed that if there's any disruptions, even, and we did see some minor ones pre-pandemic, but on the scale, we never saw anything like that on the scale that we saw the pandemic. Other questions?
It's interesting that I've seen Towson really start to anchor itself to the city of Towson, like we are here in Towson. And it's interesting to me that I hear less and less about Baltimore City. And in my mind, I've just wondered, like, are we intentionally trying to, like, separate ourselves from Baltimore? And are there parts of that that's good, or are there missed opportunities? From an economic perspective, like Towson University as an institution, connected to Baltimore City.
So I think we're still connected to Baltimore City. So last night we had our BTU Awards, which demonstrated basically our strong connections to Baltimore City. But, with any sort of college, university, we're right next door to Towson. So for us, we've been sort of very isolated, ivory tower, and so we've kind of decided that it'd be good. It's easier for us to actually locate here in Towson than trying to locate our offices. Plus, between us and the city center are several colleges that would lay claim to being the anchor institution for the city. So I think through our BTU partnerships, we have strengthened our connections to the city. And I think through our building activities, our capital dollars and construction dollars, we have strengthened our relationship with Towson. And unfortunately, it's not really a city. It's sort of a collection of zip codes because there are no incorporated cities in Baltimore County. Other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. There's bagels left and coffee, or you can pick up coffee at Starbucks if you want. And thank you very much, and hope to see you here next year.